Hello and welcome to Cooking the Books with Heather. On this episode, we're not going to be cooking from a cookbook. Again, we've been doing this quite a bit lately, but it's the holidays and everybody kind of has those holiday recipes that are family favorites that you make that maybe you don't even know where they came from originally. That's kind of what we're doing right now. We are going to be making, the recipe is called The Best Cheese Ball I Ever Ate. And this is another recipe from my husband's family, from his Aunt Dorothy, Outlaw Jones. Just if you care, he doesn't know where she got it from, but she would always bring this over on Christmas. Her family joined my husband's family for Christmas Eve and Christmas Day every year. And so he very much looked forward to having this cheese ball. And we've been making this cheese ball for quite a while. We like to make it around the holidays, and we have one on New Year's Eve. On New Year's Eve, our tradition is to basically have a large assortment of snacks to get us through to midnight now that we are older people and have a hard time staying up. Particularly, this is important. So we like to have this on New Year's Eve. The good thing about this recipe is it will make 2 large cheese balls, or we generally make 4 smaller cheese balls just because we can't eat a large one in a decent amount of time. But they freeze very well. And I'll tell you how I do that at the end when we are done putting this together. But for now, all we're gonna do is grate our cheese. Because the cheese kind of needs to be at room temperature for it to all mix up together. And I already have cream cheese, you can see, in my mixer bowl coming to room temperature. This is approximately 19 ounces. The original recipe calls for 2 large and 1 small block of cream cheese. I don't believe, well, I have never seen these small blocks of cream cheese since we've been making this. Apparently they used to sell cream cheese in a 3-ounce block. So the larger blocks, the usual blocks, are about 8 ounces, and the smaller blocks were 3 ounces. So whatever, it's a little bit less because I had a partially used cream cheese in the fridge and it's fine. Not a whole lot less. So that's what we have here coming to room temperature. And it calls for New York sharp cheddar cheese, 1/2 pound of New York sharp cheddar cheese. I don't know when that disappeared from my local grocery store, but I saw 0 New York sharp cheese. I know that's a thing, and I know for years and years I saw it, but I couldn't find it this year. So any sharp cheddar cheese you like will be absolutely fine. I like to go with an orange cheese just because it makes the cheese ball a little bit more of an orange color. You could definitely use white, whatever. Use whatever you like. We have Vermont extra sharp cheese. And I just bought a standard block of cheese from the dairy section. This isn't anything super special, but it will still be delicious. So I'm going to grate this. I would not suggest using pre-grated cheese for this. You really don't want it to be pre-grated cheese has a sort of coating on it to keep it from clumping together, and which I don't care about. I have pre-grated cheese in my refrigerator all the time. I don't care. But for this, you want the cheese to be able to sort of meld together and become sort of one thing and not have chunks of cheese. So that sort of works against you in that. So I've got my my food processor fitted with a small grating blade. Not necessarily for the cheese. You can grate it at a larger size. I don't care. It will come together once it's room temperature pretty well, no matter what size it's grated at. But we're going to use the same thing for another ingredient later. So I just went ahead and just put the small one on there to only dirty one part of it. So we're going to grate this. It's not going to take long, and it's going to be very loud. So I have them cut up into pieces that will go into the chute. And we're gonna grate. Okay, that's all grated. And you always get some pieces sort of stuck up here and over there. I am the grandchild of someone who came from, who was born in the, during the Depression, grew up during the Depression, And I don't like to waste things because I grew up with my grandmother. She lived with us, and yeah, so that's a thing. I'm gonna clean all these little bits out with probably a rubber spatula. And I'm gonna put the rest of the cheese in with my cream cheese, and we're gonna be back in a couple hours when it's sort of room temperature and ready to come together. So we'll see you then. Our cream cheese and our cheddar have been sitting in this bowl for about 2 hours. Now, Aunt Dot said to leave them out overnight. This should be fine. So the next part is my least favorite thing to do in the kitchen ever, and we have to grate an onion. Now, she says a medium onion. I usually use the smallest onion that I have, and usually I do it by hand, and grating onions is just the worst because onions, like ogres, have layers and they tend to fall apart while you're trying to grate it. I haven't done this before, but we're gonna try just to use the food processor to grate the onion. So I've just cut it in half. So this is a yellow onion, just not anything special. It doesn't call for any particular kind of onion. This is what I always have on hand. It's what I always use. So I'm just gonna grate it using this, and we'll see how that works. Seems grated. I'm not gonna get all of the little bits on this one, but let me take this off and put it in the sink because this will be plenty. And oops, forgot about that part. Yes, it will make you cry. It's very, whew. So I'm just going to scrape all of this into the bowl with the cheeses, juice and everything on this. We're done with our food processor, so I'm gonna get rid of that. Be right back. So the only other thing we need to add to this is a grated clove of garlic. I'm gonna use a microplane for this. She says no juice on this, but it doesn't get very juicy from my experience, and I'm not going to put this in cheesecloth and squeeze it out. I'm just not gonna do it. I never do, and it's fine. I've kept the top on this because you need a little place to hold it, and there's a piece that you don't use, and it's hard to grate to the very end of these. So there we go. So we have our onion, our garlic. Oh, and the last thing is, she says 2 strong shakes of Tabasco. I have Texas Pete because we're still trying to use up this big bottle in the refrigerator. So there we go. Should be plenty. I'm gonna get my stand mixer set up here and we'll be right back. So everything's in my mixing bowl. I've got the paddle attachment, and we're just gonna combine this until it is pretty homogeneous, pretty well combined. I'm probably gonna scrape it down a couple times with my spatula, but that's what we're gonna do right now. So our goal here is to make this pretty light and spreadable so that when it is at room temperature, you can put it on a cracker or a piece of toast or whatever you want to serve it on. But so it takes a little while to get it all mixed up, especially if it's maybe a little still a little chilly, but beating it up will help. And so we're gonna keep going for a little while here. I'm gonna call that done. So I'm gonna scrape everything into the bowl and get ready for the next piece. All right, so what I'm gonna do at this point, start this off. I'm going to sort of get this into one ball in the center and roughly divide it. I still think 2 balls is way more than we can eat. Divide it into 2 portions. Okay, so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna get a bowl, because we're supposed to put it in a bowl before we wrap it in plastic wrap, because this will just stick all over the plastic wrap. I'm gonna get a bowl. I'm going to wash my hands thoroughly with cold water so they're not too warm. And I will be back to form this into balls. So I'm gonna take roughly half of it out and try to form it into a kind of round ball. Just in my hands. Pretty sure I've done this before where I let it sit a bit to harden up before I do this, but now everything's going to be covered in cheese ball. So this will taste very garlicky, very oniony at first. So right now is not the right time to eat this. There is another step to this that we'll have to do tomorrow after this hardens up, but it's going to be just very aggressively flavored right now, but those flavors will soften up, will mellow out as it sits in the refrigerator or in the freezer, because it does freeze very well. And now I have cheese ball all over my hands, and I did a very poor job of deciding how much was half, but I'm gonna call this good for now, and I will reshape them a little bit tomorrow when they are more solid, because we're going to cover this in plastic wrap and put it in the refrigerator overnight. And we'll see you tomorrow. So it's the end of the evening, and we just realized that it's been about 2 days since we put our cheese ball in the refrigerator to firm up, and we have forgotten to finish them. So we're here to do that. I have about a cup of pecans that I have used my little whirly pecan nut chopper thing on at the fine setting. Maybe it's a little finer than the other setting, than the coarse setting, but you want these pretty small for this. And we're going to cover these cheese balls with the pecans, and then I've got some plastic wrap just sort of stuck to the countertop. This one is just the one that was on top of the bowl, and I'm going to reuse it. And so I'm going to kind of roll them up a little bit better, make the pecans stick to them, and hopefully this will be enough. There are no measurements for this in the recipe. It's just enough to cover your cheese balls, and if you make 4 of them, you'll need just a little bit more than you do if you use 2. So we'll see how far a cup gets us. And these are just raw, plain pecans. We have not toasted them. They're not like butter and salted. They are just raw, plain pecans. That's what the recipe calls for, just pecans. So I'm going to get started, and I'm going to get very messy, but see, they stick together and don't stick to my hands quite as bad now, so I can kind of make it a little bit more of a ball. And the pecans cover a multitude of sins, so they do not have to be pretty at this stage. I'm just going to roll them in the pecans and try to get it as covered as I can. And yes, I'm going to be messy because that's just how I am. You want these covered, but you know, if you miss a spot, it's not a big deal. Everything will be just fine. All right, so I'm going to put this over here, and after I wash my hands, I will wrap them in the plastic wrap, and then you can store them in the refrigerator if you're going to use them pretty quickly. But if you want to keep them for a while, you can put them in the freezer, and you can have it the next time you want a cheese ball. They do keep very well in the freezer. I'm not sure how long we've kept them, but definitely over a month. It's cheese, so I know cream cheese doesn't always do well texture-wise in the freezer, but we've had no problems with these. You will want to let them come warm up a bit before you use them, just because they will be easier to spread on your cracker. But that is it for this step. And yep, a cup was plenty for this. So there you go. I have some left over. We'll be back to let you know exactly how they taste.
On this episode of Cooking the Books with Heather, you watched my mom make the best cheese ball I ever ate. The adults love this on crackers and toast points, but today we're giving you our review. So, Sawyer? No, Sawyer, try.
Okay, I'm doing my review while my sister is eating. Now, my dad and my mom loved it. You guys already know from all the other Frenchy things that I made, they made it 1.5 out of 10. But I am going to give one compliment to this. I love that you put some nuts on surrounding it so that you kind of, if you don't know what this is, you kind of have to guess, like, is it a ball of nuts? Or is it a cheese ball? You kind of have to guess. I didn't like that it kind of has a bit of bitter taste to it. Like the cheese is I hate this type of cheese. And then the nuts I will eat no matter what.
Where did you even bite it? You just ate the cheese, not the cracker?
Yeah, I just bit a tiny piece of the cheese.
It was better than I expected. So, I thought it was going to be like pimento cheese. And I don't like pimento cheese because it's kind of that color. But yeah, it was better than I thought. And you can't really taste the nuts.
Honestly, 5 out of 5 out of 10.
5 out of 5 out of 10. Anyway, I'm supposed to say that this freezes well and you can make it in like four smaller ones, or one big one, or two like my mom and dad made, or just my mom.
Or a 10 if you make them really small.
If you enjoyed watching my mom make this recipe, don't forget to like and subscribe and come back to watch her make more recipes like this one.
If you enjoyed this episode of watching my mom do this recipe, then hit that like button and don't forget to subscribe for her to make more things and you get to watch them. So hit that like button.